Greetings. Today we are going to witness the horror and uncover the dark, decaying truths of Resident Evil Requiem. I hope you are ready to descend back into the ruins where the nightmare first began. The survival horror begins now. Hope you like it. Chapter 1: The Wrenwood Incident. The floorboards of the Wrenwood Hotel groaned under Grace Ashcroft's feet, a sound she hadn't heard in 8 years. She didn't have time for nostalgia. A sixth body had been found, and the Midwest was paralyzed by a mysterious affliction. She stepped into room 204, the same room where her mother, Alyssa Ashcroft, was murdered, and froze. The bed was covered in surveillance photos of her, taken while she slept, while she worked, and while she grieved. Suddenly, the door slammed. A police officer stood there, his skin mottled with black bruises, his teeth falling onto the carpet with a wet thud. "Officer, are you okay?" Grace asked, reaching for her sidearm. The man didn't answer. He hissed, his eyes turning a sickly golden yellow before charging. Grace dodged the first swipe, the officer's shotgun firing a wild blast into the ceiling. She scrambled toward the window, the zombified lawman snapping at her heels. With a desperate shove, she sent him crashing through the glass, his body plummeting to the pavement below. Before she could breathe, a shadow moved by the fireplace. A warped, towering man in a snakeskin coat stood there, watching her through a technological mask. "I've been waiting for you, Grace," Dr. Victor Gideon rasped. He lunged with inhuman speed, his hand closing around her throat until the world went black. Chapter 2: The Kidnapping. Outside, the screech of tires announced Leon S. Kennedy's arrival. He watched through his windshield as Gideon tossed Grace's limp body over his shoulder. "Got a person of interest," Leon muttered into his comms. "And he's not looking for a peaceful surrender." Gideon didn't run. He pulled a custom injector and fired T-virus needles into the surrounding crowd. Chaos erupted as civilians screamed, their bodies twisting into mindless feeders in seconds. Leon moved through the slaughter with practiced lethality, his signature axe bifurcating a lunging zombie. "Leon, your vitals are spiking," Sherry Birkin's voice crackled in his ear. Leon pulled off his glove, revealing the same black blotches that marked the Wrenwood victims. Raccoon City Syndrome was finally catching up to the survivors. He coughed, a spray of blood hitting the dashboard. "I'm fine, Sherry. Just get me the address." He tracked Gideon to the Rhodes Hill Chronic Care Center, a facility purchased with Umbrella's blood money. Leon knew the clock was ticking. If he didn't find the cure Gideon was hiding, he'd be the next monster he had to put down. Chapter 3: Rhodes Hill, the Care Center. Grace woke up upside down, a needle in her arm draining her blood into a glass vat. She kicked free, the glass shattering as she fell into the darkened wards of Rhodes Hill. This wasn't a hospital. It was a human harvesting facility. In the shadows, a creature known as the Girl, a massive, bird-legged hag with tattered clothes, stalked the halls. Grace grabbed a flashlight, realizing the monster hissed and recoiled whenever the beam hit its skin. She ducked into a side room and found a glass cell. Inside sat Emily, a young blind girl clutching a doll. "Is someone there?" Emily whispered, her cataracts milky white. Grace used a stolen ID band to bypass the locks, pulling the girl into her arms. "We're getting out of here," Grace promised. But the walls began to vibrate with a horrific sound. The chef zombie was hacking through meat in the kitchen, and the singing nurse was shrieking a lullaby that drew every blisterhead in the building toward them. Grace handed Emily a braille-coded puzzle box. "I need you to read this," she whispered as the scratching of Marie's claws grew louder outside the door. Chapter 4: The Water Treatment Escape. The escape was a frantic sprint through the facility's basement. Marie, the shadow ghost, burst through the ventilation, her elongated appendages reaching for Emily. Grace shoved the girl into a service elevator just as the monster's hand clamped onto the door frame. Grace didn't hesitate. She slammed the manual override, the elevator cable snapping and the heavy car plummeting, severing the monster's hand with a sickening crunch. They reached the water treatment plant, but the roof remained sealed. "Stay behind me," Grace yelled, flipping the industrial switches as Marie, regenerated and furious, emerged from the sludge. Grace lured the beast directly under the central hatch. With a final pull of the lever, the massive roof groaned open. Blinding ultraviolet sunlight poured in, and the monster didn't just burn. It dissolved into a steaming puddle of ooze. They stumbled toward a waiting helicopter, but a swarm of zombies clung to the landing skids. The pilot, Harry, screamed as the windshield shattered, the chopper spinning out of control and slamming into the courtyard in a ball of fire. Chapter 5. The Reunion at Rhodes Hill. Leon dragged Grace from the wreckage of the helicopter, his sniper rifle barking as he cleared the remaining zombies. But the victory was hollow. Emily lay in the dirt, her small body mangled by the crash. Grace desperately performed CPR, her tears hitting the girl's face. "Come on, Emily, breathe." The girl's eyes flew open, but they weren't human. Her skin bubbled, her limbs elongating into a distorted, baby-like monstrosity. "Grace, get back," Leon yelled, shoving her aside. He didn't want to do it, but the creature was lunging, its spiked appendages ready to kill. Leon fired 3 precise shots, the monster Emily collapsing into the dust. Grace screamed, her mind breaking as she handed Leon his weapon back. "This is my fault," she whispered, turning her back on him and walking into the fog. Gideon stepped out of the shadows, greeting the broken woman. "You're exactly where you need to be," he said, leading her toward a waiting chopper as Zeno, a man who looked exactly like the dead Albert Weskier, watched from the cockpit. Chapter 6. Return to Raccoon City, the ruins. Leon drove his motorcycle through the jagged crater that used to be Raccoon City. The US government claimed a nuke had sterilized the site, but the buildings were still standing, and the dead were very much alive. He pulled up to the RPD station, a ghost of the building he'd bled in 28 years ago. Inside, a Welcome Leon sign was still pinned to the wall, a cruel taunt from Zeno. The station was a death trap. A giant spider the size of a tank blocked the main hall, its many eyes reflecting Leon's flashlight. Leon parried a lunging leg with his axe and rolled, tossing a grenade into the beast's maw. As he climbed toward the roof, he found files that shattered the official history. The missile strike hadn't been an act of containment. It was a cover-up by the connections to hide a facility called the Ark. Leon coughed up a thick glob of black blood. "Sherry," he rasped into his radio. "The government didn't bomb this city. They buried it." Chapter 7. The Ark Facility, Deep Underground. Leon descended into the crater beneath the Raccoon City orphanage, entering the sterile, white halls of the Ark. This was the administrative heart of Umbrella's legacy, now controlled by the connections. He was immediately met by the elite guard USS operators wearing Hunk's signature gas masks. They moved with terrifying precision, but Leon was a force of nature. He engaged their commander in a brutal axe duel, the two men trading blows in a red-lit corridor. "I know those marks on your hand," Leon spat, parrying a lethal swing. "You've got the syndrome too." The commander didn't speak. He fought until Leon finally buried his hatchet in the man's chest. Leon pushed deeper, passing vats of Tyrant 501 models and Beta 2 liquors. He found Grace in the central chamber, where Zeno was forcing her to face a terminal. "Spencer's virus is behind this door, Grace," Zeno sneered. "The mind control that will end all wars." Chapter 8. The Elpis Revelation, The Twist. Grace ignored Zeno and slid an MO disc into the terminal, a final interview her mother had recorded with Oswell E. Spencer. On the screen, the old man looked frail, his god complex replaced by a terrifying clarity. Happiness cannot be achieved at the expense of others, Spencer whispered on the tape. My research opened Pandora's box. Elpis is my atonement. Grace realized the truth. She wasn't a clone or a superweapon. She was an orphan Spencer had adopted to prove he could still care for something normal. Elpis wasn't a mind control virus. It was a universal antiviral designed to render all T-virus-based weapons useless. Zeno, blinded by his lust for power, shoved Grace aside and entered the password he thought he'd decoded. But Grace spoke first. The password is hope. The vials of Elpis hissed as they released. Zeno, thinking he was ascending, injected himself immediately. He screamed as his black bruises vanished, his viral strength withering away until he was nothing more than a terrified, middle-aged man. Chapter 9. Final Boss and Escape. The Ending. You're just a cheap imitation, Victor Gideon sneered, stepping from the shadows and decapitating the now-human Zeno with a single swipe of a mutated claw. Gideon had injected himself with a nemesis parasite, his body swelling into a grotesque mass of flesh and electricity. Leon, now cured by a dose of Elpis, stood his ground. Time to bury Umbrella's last skeleton, he growled, unloading the Requiem shotgun into the monster's pulsating core. The facility began to tear itself apart. Leon and Grace were pinned down by falling debris, the air growing thin. Just as the darkness closed in, the roof shattered. Chris Redfield's Houndwolf squad rappelled into the wreckage, hauling them into the light. In the aftermath, the truth about the connections and the Raccoon City cover-up flooded the news. Grace sat at her desk at the FBI, looking at a photo of her and a fully cured Emily, whom she had adopted. The nightmare was over, but in the ruins of the Ark, 2 shadowed soldiers retrieved a final canister. The war was just beginning. And there you have it, the final chapter of the Umbrella legacy. Leon Kennedy and Grace Ashcroft survived their descent into the heart of the Ark, proving that even in the darkest ruins of Raccoon City, hope can be recovered. The Umbrella curse has finally been broken, not by a weapon of war, but by Elpis, an antiviral that renders the world's most dangerous progenitor-based bioweapons useless. While Leon and Sherry begin their recovery, Grace has found her own form of atonement by adopting Emily, giving the girl the normal life that Oswald Spencer originally intended for her. The truth about the Raccoon City missile strike and the government's ties to the connections is now exposed to the world, completing the work Alyssa Ashcroft started nearly 30 years ago. However, the war is far from over. In the smoldering remains of the facility, mysterious soldiers have already retrieved a final objective, ensuring that the horror will return in the next chapter of the franchise. This concludes our journey through the story of Resident Evil Requiem. Thank you for joining us to witness this tale of horror and redemption. Hope you liked it.